Support comes from ServiceNow. We're for people doing the creative work they actually want to do. That's why this ad was written and read by a real person and not AI. You know what people don't want to do? Boring, busy work. Now with AI agents built into the ServiceNow platform, you can automate millions of repetitive tasks in every corner of your business, IT, HR, and more, so your people can focus on the work that they want to do. That's putting AI agents to work for people. It's your turn. Visit servicenow.com.
It's The Other Side of Midnight with Frank Morano.
This is The Other Side of Midnight. I'm Frank Morano. I'll tell you, I'm not a fan of many in the cable news game, and it has nothing to do with ideology. It has to do with original thought. There is such a dearth of people that seem like original thinkers. It's one of the reasons that I'm so fond of Michael Smerconish on CNN. I might disagree with him on Ukraine, might disagree with him on a whole host of issues, but at least it's different from any other show that's on cable news. And the same thing could have been said of Dylan Ratigan on MSNBC years ago. That was a guy who, again, I didn't agree with on everything, but he did a show that was just different. It was interesting. It was intellectually stimulating. But for my money, the grand poobah of original thought and different thinking on cable news is a show that cable news viewers no longer get to watch. Thankfully, it's still available in some form on the internet, although we'll get into how it might have changed, and that's Tucker Carlson. I have to tell you, I've been following Tucker kind of as a student of the news for many years, since the mid-1990s, and I was never too impressed with him. I thought he was just like everybody else that was on cable news, parroting right-wing talking points. And then something happened. Right around the time that he got his primetime show on the Fox News channel, I was blown away. I was absolutely blown away at the type of guests that he was having. They were the kind of guests that you'd never see on any show. I was blown away at the type of commentaries that he'd be doing. I mean, while the rest of Fox News was fawning over every member of the Trump administration, here was a guy that was spending 20 minutes calling out John Bolton while he was the sitting national security advisor. Here was a guy that was spending 15 minutes eviscerating the president's own family members, including Jared Kushner. And to me, it was amazing. The things that he was saying about vaccines, the things that he was saying about Russia, the things that he was saying about all these sacred cows that you would never, ever hear mentioned on cable news. It was amazing that he got to stay on TV as long as he did. It was not at all surprising to me when his show ended. So how did this transformation take place? How did a garden variety conservative, maybe even neoconservative journalist become the leader of what I'll call the Tucker Carlson wing of the conservative movement? Somebody that has had a ringside seat for all things Tucker for a long time is Chadwick Moore. You might be familiar with Chadwick Moore. He's a journalist. He is a widely sought after public speaker. I've seen him speak. There's nobody better. He's a political commentator, a cultural critic. He's a columnist. He's been a contributing editor at The Spectator. He's been the editor-in-chief of Outspoken, and we could go on, but we only have a 4-hour show. But he's here today primarily in his capacity as author of the book Tucker, a fascinating biography of the one and only Tucker Carlson. Chadwick Moore, thanks so much for joining me on the radio.
Hey, Frank, great to be here. Thank you so much for that introduction. And, I think you really beautifully summed up what a lot of people think about Tucker Carlson and what led to his superstardom in the world of the Trump movement, the conservative media, and really American politics in general.
So, Chadwick, before we get to Tucker, let me ask you about the issue of the day, which seems to be tariffs. You tweeted about, kind of a funny tweet that President Trump put out yesterday, and then you said, this is why I voted for President Trump, that and tariffs. Now, I feel the same way. I love these tariffs. I'm a protectionist trade guy going back many years. That's become a much more difficult thing for me to say at night when I'm talking to listeners whose 401ks are being eviscerated by what they're told is the tariff policy, and when I'm out talking to voters during the day as a candidate for office in a very Trump-friendly district who are concerned about prices rising, who are concerned if they have a small business that they may not be able to afford things. Well, let me ask you, since you tweeted that, why are tariffs, specifically these tariffs, so great?
Well, first of all, we have someone in the White House who has a pulse for the first time in 4 years. What's happening is terribly exciting. I don't know what people thought America First meant. Did they think it meant vibes or essays or snaps? I mean, this is what Trump ran on. This is what he ran on in 2016. And, various forces working against him. I think that administration he didn't have his footing, knew what he was doing as well. And now this is exactly what everyone voted for. I mean, this is the populist America First agenda at its core. So, all this, I understand all this nervousness that people are feeling. Yet, the Black Monday predictions didn't really hold true. The market went down. It didn't absolutely tank. It wasn't catastrophic, bounced back much the next day. Sure, of course, people are nervous, and I'm not an economist, so, don't get me started on this. But this is being a trade protectionist is completely, what is a big issue to me, and I think to millions of people who support President Trump. And, think about back to 2016. Think about Bernie Sanders before the Democrats stole the nomination from him. It was supposed to be his turn. He had all the populist momentum behind him on the left. He was a trade protectionist. He was against the Trans-Pacific Partnership, if you recall, and so was President Trump. And it was actually the Bernie supporters that got the DNC to remove their support from the Trans-Pacific Partnership from the official platform before they anointed Hillary Clinton. So this issue has been something that people on the populist left and the right have been supporting for a long time. And the forces that are most powerfully against it and are stirring the most fear against it are exactly what you'd expect. It's the exact same swamp creatures, the whole National Review side, the whole Bulwark, whatever that guy's name is, Bill Kristol set. And I think that a lot of people have, I think the average person, the average Trump people, they might be a little nervous. They have tons of faith in what he's doing, especially with people like Scott Bessent by his side, who's very well regarded in the world of economics and finance. And I think that a lot of people just trust that Trump knows what he's doing.
Now, a lot of people may say, all right, that sounds good, but I want more American manufacturing. I want more stuff made here. But it's not as if we're able to flick a switch and have all of American manufacturing come back. It takes time to build factories and to hire people and to get manufacturing up and running. Is it worth the cost in terms of higher prices potentially and in terms of a decreased stock market, or at least stock market volatility, while we ramp up American manufacturing?
Well, I think the argument on the pro-tariff side is that we weren't going to have a country in a few years if things kept going the way that they're going. And not only is this just about, some sort of nostalgia for American manufacturing, but it's also about national security. Look what happened during COVID, a virus that came out of China, and then we realized that China was making all of our pharmaceuticals, all of our PPE. If you recall all the shipping problems happened under Biden with Transportation Secretary Buttigieg. I mean, we realize that we are so incredibly vulnerable by not manufacturing anything in this country that it seems like if there's, at least I believe, I can't speak for the Trump administration or anything, but look, if there's got to be a little pain in order to right this ship so we don't utterly crash and spin out of control in the next few years, then it's got to happen. I mean, I think I heard someone recently make the comparisons to an addict, to a drug addict, once you quit, I'm a sober person. I know that once you quit your addiction, there's a little bit of pain while you readjust to a more stable and healthy living. And I think that's how a lot of people view the economy.
If at 30 minutes after the hour, this is The Other Side of Midnight. We're talking with Chadwick Moore. He's the author of the book Tucker. All right, I could talk with you about tariffs and a lot of the other things you've written for hours, but let's talk Tucker. You're the author of the book Tucker. Why'd you want to write a book about Tucker Carlson? You clearly are capable of writing about a wide variety of things. Of all people, why Tucker Carlson?
You summed up really well in your introduction, in that, there's not many people on cable television that you would really want to read a biography about, certainly not many that I would want to write one about. But I knew there was something different about Tucker, and I'd been on his show for basically the entire run of his show on Fox News. Even weirdly, I was on the last episode, which of course we didn't know at the time was going to be the last episode, just as a guest. But even through that, I knew that there was something different about Tucker, not just that his approach to the news and that his show was the most interesting and the most highly rated show on cable news, but that he brought something to it. He brought a curiosity. There was something more. There's something deeply human about him that just came through, I think, especially in those monologues, which are all written by him. And, you were sort of right to point out that for much of his career, if you recall the bow tie days on CNN's Crossfire, he was this kind of beltway agitator for the Republican Party. And I think that what happened around 2016, and that's not to say, actually, before that, he was a magazine writer, and his magazine writing is beautiful and hilarious. And I got to cover a lot of his old writing and working on this book. So he's always had a literary streak to him. And he kind of stumbled into television, and he kind of assumed that role of Republican talking head on cable news, just give those talking points, support whatever the party's doing. And I think around 2016, like tons of people, he had this awakening and political realignment, and also politics just got way more interesting. And I believe he started to think more deeply about the things he had supported and was supporting, the direction the country was going. And that really got channeled into his show. I mean, this was a guy that he covered things that he was interested in. And the issues that what he's truly interested in is these bigger questions of faith, of family, of beauty, of a nation and a people, rather than just what exactly is going on in the news that day. But of course, those things are all downstream from those larger issues. And I think that really came through, and it made for a wonderful subject to write about in this book, getting to know someone like that and really getting to know his life and what makes him tick, and getting to know his family and his day-to-day.
You mentioned the bow tie. Why did Tucker lose the bow tie? Okay. So I wrote, it is in the book, and now I can't even remember the exact story he told me, but there was a moment he was at a party and somebody made a comment about it. Now I can't remember what the exact comment was. I put it in the book, and it was from that moment on that he never wore it again. Now I have to go back and remember exactly what that was and who said it. No, all good. Why did Tucker's positions evolve? I remember in the run-up to the Iraq War, there were a lot of conservative anti-war voices, for instance, people like Pat Buchanan, people like Ron Paul, people like Bob Novak. Tucker Carlson was not one. What changed? Why did he go from being, a Bush and McCain supporting neocon to being being what we see now?
It was seeing it for himself. He went to Iraq on assignment for Esquire magazine, and he was embedded with a bunch of civilian contractors there in 2003. And he saw firsthand what this nation building looked like that America was doing. And he was horrified by it, absolutely horrified, while having the utmost respect for the soldiers, the Americans he was embedded with. Even they were on his side of saying, this is a disaster. He was looking at what we were doing, how impossible it was, the task that we were trying to undergo in the Middle East with these absolutely foreign cultures who completely hated us and didn't want us there. So it was that moment that really, firstly, shifted his thinking totally on the Iraq War. He came back from that trip against it. And then that was sort of the beginning of his beginning to question the kind of Washington ethos and the way the system worked. You forget that he, he's from California originally, but lived in D.C. mostly his entire adult life. So he knew these swamp creatures intimately on both sides. He knew the club very well. And that's one reason why they hated him so much when he was on Fox, because he knew these people better than they knew themselves. Their kids went to the same school. They belonged to the same private clubs. And he could see how destructive they were, and he could see how phony they were.
If people are just tuning in, this is The Other Side of Midnight. I'm Frank Morano. We're talking with Chadwick Moore. Would you say that Tucker Carlson is the modern Pat Buchanan? And I mean that not only in terms of ideology, but in terms of influence and some of the criticism that he gets. Still, years later, 32 years after Pat ran for president, people still call him anti-Semite, they call him racist, they call him every name in the book. I've heard a lot of the similar invectives hurled at Tucker for both the ideology that he's promoting and for, the criticism he's gotten. Is he the 21st century Pat Buchanan?
I could see that. I always thought more of the next generation of Rush Limbaugh. You know, I always sort of thought of the torch from that being passed, especially when he was on Fox and after Rush had passed away, there really was no one else. I mean, the sad thing about Fox firing him, the only really sad thing is that he had that perspective in the mainstream media. The only place that perspective existed in the mainstream media. You know, of course, more people see him now and hear him now than when he was on Fox News. But at least when he was in mainstream media, he had the ear of those in power because they deeply care what's being said in mainstream media, even if nobody else in the country does. So, you know, in that respect, I thought of Rush Limbaugh, who, you know, had such a reach on terrestrial radio for so long. Now I don't know how much leaders are listening to what he says, but they certainly were when he was on Fox.
That's certainly true. He did that one interview, I think it was with Joe Rogan, in which he talked about how he doesn't email.
Clorox Sentiva smells like grapefruit. Cleans like Clorox. And feels like...
Okay, we could be here all day. Try Clorox Sentiva for a trusted clean with long-lasting freshness. Also available in lavender and coconut. Use as directed.
The #1 selling product of its kind with over 20 years of research and innovation. Botox Cosmetic, onabotulinum toxin A, is a prescription medicine used to temporarily make moderate to severe frown lines, crow's feet, and forehead lines look better in adults.
Effects of Botox Cosmetic may spread hours to weeks after injection, causing serious symptoms. Alert your doctor right away as difficulty swallowing, speaking, breathing, eye problems, or muscle weakness may be a sign of a life-threatening condition. Patients with these conditions before injection are at highest risk. Don't receive Botox Cosmetic if you have a skin infection. Side effects may include allergic reactions, injection site pain, headache, eyebrow and eyelid drooping, and eyelid swelling. Allergic reactions can include rash, welts, asthma symptoms, and dizziness. Tell your doctor about medical history, muscle or nerve conditions including ALS or Lou Gehrig's disease, myasthenia gravis, or Lambert-Eaton syndrome and medications, including botulinum toxins, as these may increase the risk of serious side effects. For full safety information, visit BotoxCosmetic.com or call 877-351-0300.
See for yourself at BotoxCosmetic.com.
Faraday presenta Ojos con Alergia y Picazón contra el jardinero. Y el ganador es Faraday Extra Fuerte. Para aliviar la picazón de los ojos por alergia, actúa más rápido y supera a Claritin y Flonase aún a las 24 horas. Faraday, adelante.
That moment when you realize your skincare is actually working. That's Rodan & Fields, the #1 female dermatologist-founded skincare brand in the U.S. Designed by 2 dermatologists who don't just know women's skin, they know how to formulate for it. Rodan & Fields, love what you see. Tap the banner or visit rodanandfields.com/Spotify to get your exclusive welcome offer.
Is that true? How can a human being, especially one as plugged in as Tucker seems to be, how can anybody not be emailing these days?
You know, he does not email, he texts. Basically, like, he gives his phone number to, like, anyone. So he's constantly texting. He gets, hundreds and hundreds a day from just random, anyone from the most powerful people in the world to just totally random, a pilot he met on a flight once to a janitor he met here. So he texts vociferously, does not email, does not own a television. There's no TVs in either of his homes, and doesn't watch TV. And his wife is the same. She's a big letter writer. She's a big doing things with their hands. So they're not really like plugged into the news in the digital world. He gets most of his news, at least when he was on Fox, most of his ideas from just people texting him, people he barely knew who have his phone number, just texting him story ideas and things that they'd seen.
Wow. I mean, I had found that hard to believe at the time, but I will take your word for it. Clearly, there's been a change in the Republican Party. I was never a Republican, never had any interest in being a Republican, because I never wanted to be part of a party that was nominating folks like George Bush and Romney and John McCain, and that had in its leadership folks like Mitch McConnell and Lindsey Graham and folks like that. The party these days is much more America first. It's not into what country can we bomb next. It's not a free trade party anymore. It's more of a fair trade party. It's not a party that's making deals with Ted Kennedy on education. It's a party that's dismantling the Department of Education. And it's a party, quite frankly, that I'm much more comfortable with than the one of 15 or 20 years ago. With that in mind, what role has Tucker played in the transformation of the modern Republican Party? Is he solely responsible for the change that we've seen? Is he largely responsible, or is he not at all responsible for the change that we've seen? From your perspective, what role has Tucker played in the transformation that we've all observed?
I think someone on PBS once called him the high priest of Trumpism. They meant it as an insult, but I sort of liked that. And I thought that it made a lot of sense. I think he's been a great messenger and a great conduit in the media for not even necessarily Donald Trump. On his Fox News show, I noticed, I watched basically every episode of his show while I was working on this book, he didn't really on the show talk about Donald Trump a lot. And he certainly never praised him. He didn't, suck up to him, the way that lots of Fox News people do. Even the network is fervently anti-Trump. But he did talk a ton about what was happening around him and about the people who supported him and the sort of things that matter to them without necessarily talking about the man himself. So I think he was a great communicator for Trumpism, for like the average, we've got these working class guys who and young men, especially, who absolutely love Tucker Carlson. And he is, he is not working class. He was definitely born with I don't want to say a ton of privilege, because his childhood was actually very interesting and difficult, but they didn't struggle. He went to private schools on the East Coast. He wore the bow tie on CNN, but yet he still managed to understand what this segment of the population is going through, what they're experiencing, what their pain is. The people who hate them, he knew those people so well, and he knew how to describe them and what they thought of the rest of the country. So, I think with that, it was a role of, and continues to be one of expressing what a lot of people who don't have his platform believe and what they want to hear, and asking sort of questions that they're interested in.
Since you mentioned the issue of Tucker's upbringing, I know his father passed away recently. I know the New York Times did a whole big story about his mother and his relationship that he and his brother had with his mother. What do we know about Tucker's childhood and his upbringing?
So his mom, she was an heiress in California. She was from one of the wealthiest families in San Francisco. And she passed away a few years ago of cancer and living in France. But she abandoned her family when Tucker was 5 years old, just decided she didn't want to be a mom. She wanted to be a kind of bohemian art world groupie, which she was for the rest of her life. So I talked to a bunch of people who knew her in L.A. and then later in France, where she lived. So she just dropped off the kids with the dad, left, and so he raised them. His dad was a wonderful guy, and so grateful I got to meet him while I was working on the book and get to know him. He was a local reporter for an affiliate in San Diego, and then went on into the Reagan administration, heading up Voice of America. And, he's a single dad, but from that era of journalists and writers that really pursued a life of adventure and of knowledge. And he used to bring Tucker and Tucker's brother Buckley along on reporting trips and, have dinner with, gangsters in L.A. that he was writing about and things like that. So he had a ton of freedom as a kid. His dad just kind of let them do what they wanted and run around the neighborhood and get into all sorts of trouble. And I think that definitely shaped who he turned out to be. And, of course, he became a journalist for the sole reason that his father was one, the most medieval reasons to do something. He ended up pretty much forgiving his mom in later life, even though they never spoke again, with the exception of one time she called him after he was married and older, and she was drunk, and he just said, "I don't want to talk to you when you're drunk. Call back if you're sober," and she never did. And then they never saw her before she died. So that was his personal life with his parents growing up.
Wow, not an easy one. How did Tucker managed to survive at Fox News for so long? I mentioned how different his show was from everything else, but it was also directly at odds with the financial interests of the company because he was sometimes delivering commentaries that would excoriate the very advertisers that make up a lot of the Fox News revenue sources. I'm thinking specifically about drug companies. And again, whereas the rest of the lineup, especially in prime time, was parroting whatever the Republican talking points of the day was, he was sometimes going out of his way to praise Elizabeth Warren's economic agenda. How did he survive being such an odd fit for so long?
I mean, that's a great question. I think everyone who watched his show was thinking, how long are they going to let this continue to go on? Like, there's no way. And I think a lot of us thought that there was going to be something very specific he was going to say on air or slip up, make some comment that was going to be construed as overtly racist or whatever, and then they cancel the show and use that as an excuse. But that's not what happened. Fox is still not given the official reason for why they let him go, and we explore that a lot in the book and about what happened. But I think that with the Dominion lawsuit was sort of the perfect opportunity for them to get rid of him. So they, of course, used that timing to their advantage, and it had to do with the timing. Also had to do with the fact that the Republican Party had not yet officially nominated Trump. Fox News, thinking it still had that kind of power to decide who was going to be the Republican nominee. Of course, they don't have that power. They haven't for a long time, but don't tell that to the Murdochs. Thought that they could get rid of the most powerful pro-Trump voice on television and kind of control that. They, of course, wanted another nominee. The timing the timing was strategic for Fox News' political ambitions. But how he managed to stay on, he told me that he never had anyone looking over his shoulder telling him what he could or couldn't say. He felt very grateful for Fox that he had so much freedom to do what he wanted. But of course, somebody obviously was paying close attention and just not saying anything to him for a long time.
I could talk to you all day. I love chatting with you, and you just got so much information, and I want to encourage people to absolutely check out the book Tucker by Chadwick Moore. But I remember we were at a dinner recently, and I was surprised. There was sort of, we both spoke at this big meeting of conservative bigwigs, and then there was a dinner afterwards. And one of the hosts of the dinner kind of directly took aim at you for things that Tucker Carlson has said, and basically tried to convey the impression, and this was after a few glasses of wine on his part, that Tucker was some sort of mouthpiece for Russian propaganda. This is something that I hear a great deal. I'm betting not as much as you hear it. What do you say to that criticism, Chadwick, that Tucker is nothing more than a Russian mouthpiece?
Well, and also at that dinner, the prevailing narrative from some of the people there was that he's now a Qatari asset.
That's ridiculous.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it was so ridiculous. So, I've seen this a lot from the usual suspects, the same people who are really anti-tariff right now and some other things. Lately they've been in Tucker's podcast that he has out now. He's had hundreds of guests on, and I think I've counted 2 of them in the course of a 3-hour-long conversation have said at some point something that was off script about Israel. Tucker's very open about his stance on the Israel thing. He said that if he's choosing a side, he's on Israel's side, but really he doesn't want America involved in any more wars. He doesn't want us going to war with Iran on Israel's behalf. He cares about America first. So, sort it out yourself, Israel. We have your back. That's sort of what I interpret his position not to be. However, he said, as I said, like 2 guests on him said something off script about Israel. And by the way, none of that is, from the river to the sea or Israel doesn't have right to exist or anything like that. They just said something, critical. And for that, all the usual forces and the kind of pro-war, swampy conservative media come out for him. Tucker's an anti-Semite. He's platformed all these anti-Semitic people, which is total nonsense. And what's really funny is in the course of those conversations, he'll have a guest on, and they'll spend 2 hours basically saying everything horrible the United States has done across the world in the last 100 years. Every coup, maybe we assassinated JFK. Maybe they were involved in, the U.S. government was involved in trying to get Trump assassinated. I mean, every horrible thing you can imagine that the U.S. government has done, they'll mention. And then one time they'll say something about Israel, and all the headlines the next day are about that. So I'd be really wary of those people who are focusing on that. I don't think that Tucker's anti-Israel, but he wants to make it clear that he doesn't want us fighting any more wars on behalf of other countries. And for that, I mean, it tells you a lot about the forces in conservative media that narrative is stuck, that Tucker is suddenly an anti-Semite. Because as you saw at that dinner we were at, there was a lot of people that were like, well, Tucker hates the Jews now. And they came up to me afterwards after my speech, and it was pretty shocking.
I hope you'll come back, Chadwick, because I have a lot more questions for you, not only about the news of the day, but about your book on Tucker Carlson. In the meantime, I do hope people check out the book Tucker. They can go to the website tuckerthebook.com, or just go to Amazon and search Tucker and Chadwick Moore. By the way, I have long been of the opinion that people have personality types that match their names. And to some extent, I think this has been backed up by scientific data. Can you comment on the type of personality of someone named Chadwick versus the type of personality of someone named Chad? Because sometimes a similar personality is based on similar names. You can expect a Kimberly to act like a Kim. You can expect a Steven to act like a Steve. You can expect a Mike to act like a Michael, a Ray and a Raymond, but not with Chadwick and Chad. Can you speak to that?
Well, all I can say about the name Chadwick is everyone thinks I'm was raised in Connecticut, yachting off Kenny Bunkport. But I hate to tell them that Chadwick is a very working class Southern name. In fact, it's mostly a black Southern name. My family's from the South. So that's a little bit about my background. So I don't know. Chadwick, usually like crazy rednecks, is usually what a Chadwick is, despite what you might think. Just judging by how it sounds.
Fair enough. All right. Chadwick Moore, appreciate the opportunity to chat. I hope we can do so again soon.
All right. Thank you.
All right. If you want to comment on any portion of my conversation, you can go ahead and do so at 646-720-0635. That's 1-646-720-0635. This is The Other Side of Midnight. Straight ahead.